Excellent. Thank you very, very much, Reverend Dr. Roland Stringfellow, who I have known for years and years. When we both had all black hair, things have shifted and changed from that time until this in so many wonderful and positive ways. And to MCC Detroit, to the staff and the faculty, as well as the students of PSR, all of our friends, my fellow pastors and leaders, and movement leaders who are part of this conversation today from all over the country. God bless you. I am so glad to be in conversation with you. I am wearing my Ruth Bader Ginsburg pin today. She is very much in my mind and in my heart, as I'm sure she is in your mind and in your heart today. So I speak her name as she now spends her time among the elders and ancestors. Thank you so much, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, for all that you have done and for all that your aura and your aroma in the air will continue to do. So hello, everyone, and I am going to share some thoughts about a piece that I have written that I call Flexible Theology in the Time of the Coronavirus. Flexible Theology in the Time of the Coronavirus. I'm looking back right now on my grandfather, my grandpa, my pastor for many, many years, the early part of my life, taught us against what the Bible called double marriage, marriage from 1 Corinthians 7, 1 through 40. When you read 1 Corinthians 7, 1 through 40, it is the best way for me to say it is a miserable treatise regarding love, intimacy, marriage, and relationship. In verse 8 through 11, Paul says, I am telling those who are single and widows that it is good for them to stay single like me. But if they can't control themselves, they should get married because it's better to marry than to burn with passion. Then he goes further to say, a woman is obligated to stay in her marriage as long as her husband is alive. But if her husband dies, she is free to marry whomever she wants. Only it should be a believer in the Lord. In my opinion, Paul said, she will be happier if she stays single. It seems to suggest that intimacy to Paul was something that one gives into out of pure weakness, and it should really be avoided if possible. And certainly one should never entertain leaving a bad relationship for a better one. God forbid. The previous mate had to die first if you were going to get out of a poor relationship. And even then, he suggested that one should see the loss as a blessed way out of the whole mess. My grandfather, the same grandfather that taught this concept or this teaching about not being able to marry someone when your living original spouse is still alive. Essentially, he preached against divorce and remarriage. My grandfather was also my mom's first pastor, okay? And he taught and firmly believed that if one divorced, they could not marry again unless their spouse died, as the Apostle Paul and William Joseph Seymour, founder of classical Pentecostalism, and Bishop Charles Harrison Mason, who was the founder of the Church of God in Christ, my grandfather's denomination, all of them taught this. But then something happened. My birth father came home from the Korean conflict different than he was when he left. He was a pastor's son who had been introduced to war, likely came back with a diagnosable PTSD diagnosis. He was at times unexplainably violent and angry, seldom home, with very little professional support. My mother suffered, and once I was hospitalized. And my grandfather called and reminded my father that he had a hunting rifle, and my parents then divorced. But the miracle came later when my grandfather's friend came from Texas and introduced his son to my mom. And my grandfather's theology shifted because my father was still alive when my mother married the son of my grandfather's friend. Question is, what happened to my grandfather's theology? I'm going to let that sit there for a minute. I have some cousins who married interracially and interreligiously. And the passage that is in the text that speaks to not being unequally yoked, 2 Corinthians 6:14, came up several times in family discussions about these interracial marriages. There is a sense of religious and ethnic betrayal that suggested that it had to be a sin because it hurt my family so badly. Lots of discussion about each kind should be with their kind from both sides of the family, my family and the families that my family married into. Concern about family recipes and cultural inheritance, they said, would be affected by this kind of mixture of ethnicities and religions. So they were deeply opposed to it and figured that, of course, God was opposed to it too. But the miracle came later when the grandchildren came along. The family theology shifted when those beautiful little cafe au lait babies stole everyone's hearts. And everyone saw one of the family's eyes or another member's lips or another's hair or hair color, and they came together. The babies were a uniting factor. The question is, what happened to their theology against miscegenation or the perceived sin of mixed race relationships? Let's go a little further. My mother and I shared a birthday, as most of you know, and we are very much alike in many ways. My mother was a strong believer in what she believed, and she believed that any and all same-gender loving people were in need of deliverance. My mother used to cross the street if she saw someone coming, particularly a man who appeared to be gay. That's how deep her abhorrence was. My mother had an extended season of being deeply troubled when she realized that her two children, her two birth children, were both same-gender loving. She distanced herself from us for a significant time, as many of you all know. But the beginning of my mother's breakthrough came when she was invited to a number of worship experiences at City of Refuge. We invited her. She was beautifully received and she was loved, but also invited to teach and preach to us. City of Refuge was blessed beyond measure by my mother's ministry. When she called an altar call to pray for us, the altar was always full. People were healed, people were delivered, empowered by the laying on of her hands. And at the end of one of our powerful services, my mama said, well, my truth is I don't understand all of this gay stuff. I know what I've been taught to believe, but I also know the presence of God, and the presence of God is here. God's presence does not abide where God is not being worshiped. That was what my mama said. What happened to my mama's cultural, religious understanding of same-gender loving people? And the question is, what do we do when we find that what we once believed is not consistent with what we know now? When our reading of Holy Writ is through different lenses and bears fresh revelation. Of course, that is what theological education does for us. What do we do when we have built buildings and hired staff for a way of church as we know it, and somehow in a brief moment, the coming of a pandemic changes everything? Everything has changed, and we are clear that we will likely never fully go back to where we were. We find it hard to make the revolutionary, revelatory shifts because we spent so much time in the religious and theological places where we are accustomed to being, and because we tend to continue to revere those and those institutions they represented who taught us. The other thing that is a struggle is some of us were very visible and powerful where we were once before change happened. And some of us also hurt a lot of people and got hurt when we were where we were once before change happened. Some of us made promises to people that we can no longer keep because we are not where we once were. Some of us cannot sing the same songs with the same lyrics because we are not where we once were. Some of us cannot even find a scripture or a theology for where we are. It's not even in the Bible. All we know is we are not where we once were. We are not sure where we are going, but we know we cannot go back to where we once were. So it is in the time of COVID. So it is in the time of eco disaster and destruction. So it is in the time of political upheaval, not only in our country, but all over the world. So it is in a time when we have to look at our own hermeneutic, where we have to look at our own brand of theological education, where we have to look at what do we really believe. And our hermeneutic means we go from one pair of glasses to another in terms of what we can see and what we know and what we understand. A time when surety, certainty is constantly being dashed and attacked. We're not sure where we are going, but we know we can't go back to where we once were. Some of us are afraid to even tell folks we love and serve how different our current internal reality is from our past external performance. Can I say that again? Afraid to tell folk we love and serve how different our current internal reality is from our past external performance. But here's some good news, my beloved. We can follow God without being certain about all things. That's good news. That's worthy of a praise today. We can follow God without being certain about all things. We may have to follow the pillar and the cloud and just move with the way God moves. And it brings me to a thought that I shared this morning early with Detroit MCC Church. It is the story of the daughter or the daughter-in-law of Eli, who was the wife of Phinehas. When Israel lost in battle to the Philistines and the Ark of the Covenant was taken from the temple, she was just about ready to give birth to Phinehas' son when she heard that Eli and Phinehas had been killed and that the ark had been stolen. She was just about to give birth and she gave up hope for living. She died in the process of giving birth to the baby, but not before she uttered the words, Ichabod, the glory of God has departed. Because the ark was taken, she believed that the glory of God had departed. But in truth, change does not suggest that the glory of God has departed. It simply means that the glory of God has relocated. The glory of God cannot be destroyed. The glory of God cannot be departed, but it can relocate. May you say it another way, child. I don't know what we're going to do. In my best African-American ethnic voice, I don't know what we're going to do. But the truth is that can be a full sentence. I don't have to know what we're going to do. But I am certain that if I stay in line with the glory of God, the leading of God, that we can go to a completely different paradigm. Shift happens. Hallelujah. I said to you in the early part of this conversation, I saw my grandfather shift. I saw my mother shift. I saw and see myself constantly doing it. And if my folks can do it, I can do it. And if I can do it, you can do it. And if we can do it, the church can do it, and faith can do it, and systems and processes can shift following the glory and the wind of God. God has specific and real things for us to be about in this time. We're going to come to that. But I find myself dwelling often these days in the land of I don't know. And I don't mind at this time and point in my life letting people know that I don't know. And often these days as a leader, I am told I can't be in this place. But my open confession is I love God, but I don't know how or why our country must endure this current destructive administration. I don't know why we are in yet another death-dealing pandemic that's affecting schools and sports and jobs and hospital capacity and housing security and food shortage. I don't know why people are being hard hit by COVID-19. And some of them are in the path of hurricanes, more in the Atlantic Ocean, almost in the history of time as we know it. And as well as a firestorm, again, on the western part of our nation. I don't know why people are offended when Black people, disproportionately affected by all of the above, declare that Black lives matter, and that people who are not Black people or people of African descent or people not descended from slaves are also marching and saying Black lives matter. Why is that an offense? I don't know why any Christian would think and declare that slavery was a necessary evil. I don't know why conservative Christians are intent on making their brand of Christianity the national religion. What is a national religion in the United States? And like many, I love and serve God. And I thank God for my life. I thank God for my spouse. I thank God for my children, my ministry. Yet I am aware that there are many who cannot imagine the extent to which my life is reconciled to the will of God. Because we now have different paths and a different call and different experiences and different placement, different understandings. We are in polar dimensions. How can this be? And how in the world did we go from getting ready to do building plans and putting roofs on and expanding our buildings, and now we are meeting on Zoom. On Zoom, we Zoominate off and on all day, it seems. Every day. How can these things be? And I want to take an aside and share this with you before we have this conversation. It is something beautiful from the family of Richard Penniman. Little Richard, he was known. Some of us knew him as an incredible rock singer. Little Richard, during his burial at Oakwood Memorial Gardens, across the street from his alma mater, Oakwood University, he was a lifelong Seventh-day Adventist. He was a man of what seemed to be theological contradictions. His family said Richard Penniman was a special human being. His musical talents, his sense of style, his charisma made him one of the most enduring cultural icons the world has ever known. But Richard was so much more than a cultural icon. He was a devout Christian and a faithful member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Many of his fans have only known him as Little Richard, the self-proclaimed architect of rock and roll. And it's indisputable that he was that. They saw the flamboyant persona that he projected with his makeup and the dramatic pompadour hairstyle, the manic gestures and the deconstructed conventional ideas about gender identity and sexual orientation. They know about some of his struggles and his challenges with addictions and other vices, yet These facts are well documented and undeniable. But just as indisputable and undeniable is that from the time he was a child until the day he drew his last breath, Richard Penniman was a Christian. He believed in an almighty God. And Richard pursued God relentlessly, often in full view of all of his fans and fellow entertainers. His journey was not always perfect or easy, and while his many successes were public, so were some of his shortcomings. So the family hopes that the public will see Richard as more than a rock icon and a world-renowned entertainer. They hope that people will see Richard as a human being, gifted and talented, but no less in need of a savior. They hope that people will see through Richard's journey the abundant grace, hallelujah, mercy and unconditional love of God, and how they can transform a life. They hope that people will remember that while Richard indeed was the architect of rock and roll, it was much more important that he was a follower of Jesus Christ, and that he wanted all of his fans and fellow entertainers to become followers too, from his family. This resolve is so beautiful to me. Where then is our resolve? Leaders, where is our personal and corporate resolve? How do we find our way to each other and to the people we serve in this new normal, in this complicated time, when the whole idea of theological leadership is shifting and turning before our eyes? We are seeing the holy in what was once the mundane. Holy people making candles, holy people making medicine in their kitchen, holy people who are teaching yoga, holy people who are combining their Christianity with indigenous faith, holy people. I yearn for a resolve. That is what preachers do, you know, in the midst of our world, engulfed by the multiple pandemics and issues we are facing. We need something powerful and solid that we can gather around. Listen again to a more seasoned Paul. After some time in ministry, he spoke to the church in Corinth, to diverse people across the then known world. Let me read just a portion, and then we'll share as we have conversation. This is what the more seasoned Paul said. Just as a body, though one has many parts, all of its many parts form one body. So it is with Christ. We are all baptized into one spirit and form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles or slaves or free. We are all given one spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many. And now if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. And if the ear should say, well, because I'm not an eye, I don't belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? And if the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed parts in the body, every one of them just as God wanted them to be. If they were all one part, how would they be a complete body? Many parts, one body. God put the body together, giving great importance to the parts not considered especially beautiful, so that there would be no division in the body, and that its parts would have equal concern for one another, so that if one part suffers, every part suffers with it. And if one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. You are the body of Christ. You, each one of you is part of it. And yet, I am here today to show you the most excellent way. All of you who feel theologically superior, if I speak with the tongues of men and angels, and I do not have love, I am only a resounding gong and a clanging cymbal. If I have the gifts of prophecy and I can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains and I do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to suffering that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. What is love? It is patient, it is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. These three remain: faith, hope, love, and the greatest of these is love. The body, with its parts, requires flexibility and interaction. Hallelujah. Crowned by, surrounded by, held together by love. Beloved, I suggest that in this time, in our pursuit of unity, in this difficult time, during this virus, in our true endeavor at inclusivity, in our true endeavor at reaching for answers, both for our own lives, for our families, and our spiritual families, that we work toward heeding the Spirit's call for a love-infused divine theological flexibility. God has got jokes. And things can turn in a moment's time. We need to be prepared to be flexible theologically, and then to live out that flexibility in everything that we do. A love-infused divine theological flexibility, a love-infused use of our buildings, a love-infused expansive leadership model, a love-infused church without walls, flexibility. Imagine your church as though you could see through the walls out into the world, and the world could see through the walls into your church. Imagine a church with windows all around it that makes the community a part of our parish, and the gifts and skills that are not churchy still a part of who we are, as they are also God-given. A love-infused sacramental flexibility. What is spirit? What is sacrament? What is bread and wine? What is the difference between bread and wine and a bagel and a Starbucks? If God is there and the presence of the divine is in that moment, and we can have sacrament in many different ways. If we are to run this complicated race of weather phenomena, politics, pandemics, we must travel, as we said this morning, theologically light. We must apply 1 John 4, 7 and 8, which is the litmus test for God's presence. Beloved, let us love one another. For love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Those who love not know not God, for God is love. What a great opportunity for us to be more radically inclusive than we have ever been. First, with the man or woman or them or they who are in the mirror. First, homogenize yourself with yourself so that you can be your same self everywhere you are and everywhere you go. And then let's embrace the gifts and call holy even those gifts that have historically not been called holy, so that everyone will have a seat at the round table of God. And finally, let's bring that love into our current reality. Let's bring that thinking into our current theology. And let's find a theology that is flexible, movable, changeable, because we don't know what the next big thing is going to be. If we are flexible and movable and changeable, we'll be useful to God in this time. God bless you is my prayer. I am very, very excited about questions and comments. Amen and praise God.
Thank you, Bishop. The first question is, how has this perfect storm of pandemic and racial and social unrest and wildfires and firestorms threatened the unity at your own community, and how have you dealt with that as the pastoral leader?
I don't know that it has threatened the unity, because from the very beginning, and I think this also is not just true of us, but I think it is true of communities that know something already about exile and what it feels to be exiled. And I think if you have taken the course in Exile 101, it made the unity aspects not truly problematic in terms of our being able to stay together, even though we don't see each other and touch each other in the ways in which we have in the past. But there's some real effort also on the part of several of the leaders at City of Refuge. And I can say that for several churches that I know of throughout the fellowship and MCC and UCC churches and the Centers for Spiritual Living, that have a similar reality. And that is that we stay connected to one another. And when those connections are genuine and authentic, they remain. The other thing is that we have a great presence of virtual relationships as it is. You know, the reality of virtual relationships through Instagram and Facebook and all that other stuff pre-existed this reality and have, of course, grown a lot since that time. We have twice a week when we get together, both on Sundays and then again on Wednesdays with the gatekeepers. And then there are all sorts of sideline things that go on. Some opportunities where we have sat in our cars and appreciated. My birthday was wonderful on the parking lot, in the cars. It was powerful, you know. There are ways in which, but that's the foundation of that, I believe, is the fact that we know what it is. We are communities who know what it is to experience exile. I have reached a certain point in my life when I began to see that thriving, not just surviving, but thriving in exile, sometimes from my family, from the church of my origin, from the opinions of people about my otherness as a woman clergy, as a person of African descent, as a same-gender loving woman, that learning to not only survive in exile, but thrive in exile from certain communities has taught us the resilience to thrive in times like this, if we do truly celebrate our otherness. Now, if we're spending a lot of time trying to be something other than what we are not, we cannot celebrate our otherness. Because, you know, God, I told you, God's got jokes. That the last can really be first and the first last. And the passage says, and it's the Lord's doing, and it's marvelous. I said this morning, and I'll say it and said this afternoon also, the glory of God has not departed. Ichabod, the glory hasn't departed, it is simply relocated. And thanks be to God. Let's spend time being who we are. Let's spend time rejoicing that God has prepared us in interesting ways for such a time as this. But anyway, that's my testimony today.
Bishop, we have another question from Sam Layton, and his question is, how can I share spirit, love, God, or however one calls it, to someone who does not believe in God or spirituality, or a limited view that the divine is only their religion?
Oh, such a wonderful question. And I that's why I love 1 John on this 4:7-8. Let us love one another, for love is of God. And everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. He or she that loves not knows not God, for God is love. For God is love. Let me say it again. If you know love and you really know love, you know something about God. God is love, not God does love, or God sends love, or God telegraphs love. God is love. And I encourage people, when you're sharing with someone who understands being burned by religion, or understands the wickedness in the history of religion and things that have been done in the name of God that are despicable. And certainly you and I, many of us, people of color, people who are differently abled, people who are same gender loving, people, women, trans men and trans women, and people who are gender nonconforming, and people who are immigrants, know something of what it is to be abused by people who come in the name of God. But that is not God. God doesn't come that way. And it is not difficult for us to interchange the words God and love, because God is love. So persons who find it problematic to share with people about religion and faith, share with them love, because when you have shared with them love, you have shared with them God.
Bishop, another question from Leah Brown. If you feel God is calling you to start a church during this time, how do you do it? How do you find, bring together, and form community now?
How you doing, Pastor Leah Brown? That's my good friend from way back. I would say that is a phenomena that has been brewing for quite some time. Church starts, or community of believers starts in this time, or times like this. In fact, I would venture to say that the Reformation that we are reforming, by the way. We won't come out of the coronavirus the way we went in, without question. That the Reformation is tied to technological connections. That is where the likelihood of where we are going is. We have had a number of new members that have come to City of Refuge, a few of which are not geographically anywhere close to us, and that we can worship with people who are in Asia and Africa because of the opportunities that we have now, suggests that the wings of the church are not going to be limited to location. Some of you think that you have a small church, but you have 5,000 Facebook friends. Imagine if we could understand church in that concept, or in that way, and we minister with our folks that we are connected to technologically. That is certainly not any less church. It is very, very different. It's the difference in coming across the Atlantic in a steamship and flying over it in an airplane. Okay? There's a very different reality, but I'm amazed at the ways in which we are coming into it, and that we are overcompensated with skills to connect in that way. Many of us, but we have not seen those connections as holy. Starting a church that has no walls, that has no physical boundaries. What a powerful opportunity where people are drawn together because they are like-minded around purpose and vision. I expect to see that that's going to happen more and more and more and more. You know, it was all about Amazon. And then Walmart figured it out. And then Target figured it out. And because they figured it out, they're not closing stores and going out of business. Somebody understands what I'm saying. We've got to figure it out. There's another way to do this than the way that we have done it. And if we have buildings, we can turn our buildings into opportunities for social services to work out of and in our buildings and still keep a worshiping community in that place. But imagine what we could do with brick and mortar if we could redesign them so that they become centers for community in some real tangible ways. God's got a plan, and it's going to be very different. Coming out of this, it's just going to be very different. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And I do not mean that in terms of eschatological terminology. I have seen the glory of the way that the glory of God has not departed, but it is moving. It is being rerouted in very important ways. It is being reformed in very important ways. Thank you for that question, Pastor Leah. Love you much. Love to the family.
There is a hand up, but we're going to ask all of our participants to please put your questions or comments either in the chat or in the Q&A area. And then that way we can see it and make sure it is expressed. But the next question is, during these days when we are waiting for the new and the change, what are the ways that we can encourage ourselves, and especially those of us who are responsible for congregations, to be encouraged, especially when there seems to be so much happening? If you pay attention to the news, you can get just overwhelmed, and you know, one onslaught after another onslaught. And so ways of to be grounded and practice that self-care that that we know we should be doing.
Yes. I would venture to say this is our time of upheaval. This is not the first time. History has a tendency of giving us amnesia sometimes, you know, that even in our lifetime, those of us that have lived, you know, as long as I have lived, have seen difficulty and struggle in our history. This is not our first time. This is not our first pandemic. HIV is 30 years old and it is still with us. So we do understand by virtue of our realities in history. But I think that what we have to be able to see is that in each of these realities, God has never left us and God has not forsaken us. I tell you, when I think about Moses and the experience that talks about him being frustrated with Israel when they were carrying on and making a calf and longing to go back and be in Egypt and all the things that were going on. And he got mad and went up in the mountain and said to God, okay, either you're going to have to do something for me or I'm not going another further. I'm not going anywhere else with these people. And the text says that God hid him in the overhang or the cleft of a rock and told him that I'm going to pass in front of you. My glory will pass in front of you. But you cannot see my face. You cannot see my face and live, but you'll see my hinder part, the hinder part of my glory, but you cannot see. And I have often thought about this passage and wondered if it was translated properly. But what came up for me when I read it in the not too recent past is that God did not reveal to Moses where God was going. What God revealed to Moses in that moment is where God has been with Moses, essentially what God has taken Moses and Israel through. What Moses needed was a moment of remembering. I think for all of us, both whether we lived in the past or we have studied the past, we need to remember what it is that God has brought us through as a people of African descent, as people who are LGBT and othered, as people who have experienced immigration, hatred and misuse, as people who have been alienated from church and religion. We need to remember what God has done so that we can fortify ourselves with memories. I suggest to you in this moment, in this difficult moment, remember. I remember who it is that I am is not what my mother could be, was not what my grandmother could be. Something has substantively changed. But I remember how they suffered. I remember that the women in my family could not touch the pulpit unless they were the cleaning woman. One of the reasons that I have my grandfather's pulpit in our modern facility, I have an old pulpit in a modern facility because I remember when I could not touch it. Now it is mine and ours. It's important to remember where it is that we have come from so that we won't get discouraged and somehow feel that we have been abandoned. Our God is the God of miracles. My folks said, God is a way maker. My grandmother said, God will make a way where there seems to be no way. And we have to do the fight. Our ancestors did the fight. We have to do the work. We have to speak truth to power. We have to, and though this is a difficult time and it is one thing on top of another, we have had one thing on top of another in our history, in our past. And our God has moved us on and forward. And now we are in that place where the arc of justice bends toward justice. And sometimes it pulls back, but never all the way back. And then it goes forward and it pulls back, but never all the way back. And then it goes forward. And so we are in that struggle now. We are in it now. That's why we have to get in the cleft of the rock, my beloved. What does it mean? Get under God's wing. Make sure that our conversation, our devotion, our quiet time, our personal time is a time where we infuse our faith. Get prepared, and then we get strapped. What does that mean? We put on our armor, the armor of God, and go back out there and do the justice work, knowing at the end of the day that justice will prevail. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of God. And there are a lot of fights to have. And there will always be someone pushing back against justice, but justice will prevail. And we must participate in that, knowing that God is on the side of justice and right and good. This is not the time for giving up. And this is not the time for losing hope. That is not what this little lady would have wanted us to do. This is not the time. We owe it to every ancestor to make sure that we are in the fray. But don't be in the fray thinking that somehow or other failure is imminent. I love it. Bishop Carlton Pearson said to me one day, he said, well, that's it. He said, Jesus wins and the devil gets nothing. I love that, by the way. God bless you. Next question.
Yes, Bishop. Our next question comes from Christopher Mann. He says, I have heard it said, we love the person, but do not love unacceptable behavior. How do we do this kind of love?
with great struggle. I have, there's some people that I have seen and experienced and dealt with in my life. I just wish God would give me permission to hate them so I could punch them in the throat. I know exactly what that is. And I think in humanity, especially people who abuse other people. But at the same time, I understand it. And this is the Flunderism on this, okay? And I have shared this with some of my folks here and folks in the fellowship. I call it the Ananias anointing. You know the story of Paul when Paul was Saul, and Paul, who was Saul, was working with the priests in Jerusalem and had legal papers to go and find people who were the followers of Jesus or this new religion called the Way. And he was on his way to Damascus to root out some of these folks who were following the Way with legal papers from Jerusalem. And he had an encounter with illumination, and he was knocked from his beast. And he could not see, although he could speak. And those who were with him could not speak, and they could see. And so they were together, called by God to go to Damascus and look for a guy named Ananias, and then take instruction from him when they got to Damascus. Long story short, he goes down the road with his donkey, and they're going with him. They get to the street called Straight, which always tickles me again whenever I say it. They get to the street called Straight. When they get there, Ananias is there, but Ananias had also been visited by the divine and told that Saul was coming. And Ananias had the reaction that I would have had. It's like, what? This is what, that's what Ananias basically said. Are you serious? Are you talking about Saul of Tarsus? The one who stones people? Are you really? And he's coming here, and you want him to come to my house, and you want me to accept him and receive him? And the Spirit evidently said to Ananias, yes, absolutely. He's coming to your house, but I have been dealing with him. And I want you to welcome him and pray for him and help him. Oh, that call that Ananias called is a tough call. And I'm going to say to you that I understand that it's tough to have an Ananias responsibility. But Saul will never become Paul without Ananias. It takes an Ananias who will receive someone who is in the throes of shift and change, but needs some guidance to get there. And it's a very humbling task, because things can be said to you in those moments when it makes you want to punch him in the throat. That's how frustrating it can be. But when you are called to pray for and pray with someone who Saul was, until he emerged as Paul, some 14 years in Damascus. Had it not been for his conversion to what was right and good, there would have been no inclusion of the Greeks and Romans. Christianity would have been another sect of Judaism. But the whole idea that the people could come without having to be circumcised and having to keep the feast days, the radical inclusion of the message of the gospel came through Paul with all of his issues and all of his problems, and even sometimes his own self-hatred. It came through him to the diaspora. Had it not been for Ananias, there would have been no Paul. And some of us are the Ananiases that are called to the Pauls that are out there, that we have to love the hell out of them. And we have to be clear, and we have to be firm, but we are called to them. It is a challenge. I will say it too clearly. I have had to wait years, sometimes, for people to make a full circle and come back and say, you know what? I had that so wrong. I didn't wait for them in terms of not doing what God had called me to do during that season. And it brought me joy to hear them say, I was so wrong. It brought me joy and gladness. It gave me peace about the process. But it was painful when it was happening. It is still the call of Ananias. Take that with you.
Bishop Michun asks, as we engage in deeper conversations about race at this time, we are finding that the reality of race in this country is incredibly complex and that it is a spectral rather than a black and white. Is this a time to delve into that complexity, or is it a time to keep to a simpler narrative for the goal of solidarity?
Yes. Race is a construct. There's no question about that. You know, if it were based solely on DNA, I'd have to sort of decide, and it's a cultural construct, by the way, which group am I going to hang with? The Cherokees, the Igbos, the Irish, that part of me that's 12% Irish. You know, who is it that I hang with? But by virtue of the cultural construct about people of color, and because my ancestors, our most immediate ancestors, were the progeny of slaves, I am who I am in terms of how I'm perceived in this country. So it is a cultural construct. And as such, it depends on what is laid at the feet of that cultural construct, and something that we really do need to talk about. Because in a few years, after we intermingle and we continue with miscegenation, as it was called when folks tried, before the Loving case came before the Supreme Court, tried to say it was both a sin and against the law to intermarry. If we keep on intermarrying and having babies, everybody's baby is going to be a little cafe au lait baby. For the most part, we're going to have to be prejudiced about things like, do they have gray eyes or green eyes or blue eyes or something like that? Because things will shift and change. As we know, we need to talk about race in the broader sense of the word and talk about disadvantaged populations that are disadvantaged because of the cultural constructs of race. We have to talk about that, because if we don't, we won't be able to confess openly that people who don't fit into the categories of the have-nots or the have-less are not, that they are somehow not oppressed by the people who fit essentially into the categories of the haves, who get not something that we dream of, who get better jobs, better educations, better neighborhoods, better opportunities for their children, better GI bills back in the past, better, you know, places where you can build a house, you know, where toxins are not leaching up from the ground. There's a lot of things we can talk about as it relates to race and gender and so forth and so on, and the way people are disproportionately treated. But in the context of the fact that it is a cultural construct, and for us to be able to continue to really chip away at it until we find the common denominators of oppression and the common denominators of responsibility. I believe in the realities of reparations. When a group of people did not have the equal beginnings and opportunities, there's an obligation to bring them up to speed, and just delivering people from slavery does not grant opportunities if opportunities are constantly taken away, overlooked. If people are put in jail for crack cocaine and other people's children are let off for powdered cocaine with the idea that they have affluenza, something is really problematic still. And we need to do the proper reparations, which may mean paying off a lot of student loans or helping people with their first loan on a house, or something practical and logical to level the playing field. But we have to be able to do that with an understanding that we do have a construct that is going to change over time, simply because it's going to be hard to determine who to hate. Certainly not by just how we look. It will be something even more, but we'll come up with something. The haves and the have-nots will come up with something. And let me also say, it's going to take an investment from the almost obscenely rich of our country, an investment into leveling the playing field. It will cost something. Folks will have to give up something in order for other people to be in a more balanced place, which is what folks push back against. You know, people hate for me to say it, but Jesus was a socialist. Let's be clear. There's no doubt about that. And his teachings were socialist. That if one person has food, someone else should not be hungry. There should be a way for us to have a distribution of wealth in some way. And capitalism can be wicked like that. We have to find a way. Essentially, there's something in between that is probably the kingdom of God. We have to find a way.
Bishop, thank you. The next question comes from Kathy Henry. She would like to know, our pastoral care needs have increased, so we are deploying and training more lay pastors. Tips on effective training and spirituality feeding these volunteers in our virtual world.
Well, in some ways, it is the way that Jesus dispatched the disciples. You know, you go here, or you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. We are having to do that. I think that, again, the model of church and church faith-based organizations, but particularly church, is changing to the round table. I teach it, we live it here at City of Refuge. I am a part of a table called the Shepherd's Table. I'm the senior pastor of the church, but there are a number of pastors around that table. And the pastors around that table all have responsibilities for certain aspects. We share a stipend, and we are all around the table. And we all have other jobs. And so we're dispatched differently according to our gifts and skills and abilities. I think that that's probably the way that what it is that church is morphing to and becoming. And so we have to help people be prepared for the specialty area of ministry that they're connected to. We begin with passion, and then we want that passion to be informed. We want that passion to be taught what that passion needs to know. If you care about people, we need to make sure that we are helping people find the skills and the ability and the things that are written and the processes that have demonstrated that they are effective in that area of their passion. And then I think that we'll be more what the church was designed to be in so many ways, each one teaching one, all of us connecting ourselves to the people in broad ways, in much broader ways than leaving all of that to the person who is the senior leader of the organization. I think we can get much more done that way. I think we'll be a lot less stressed that way. I think that there are concomitant roles that we can play in public policy, in grant making, in providing services like counseling and care for the seniors, and providing support for our youth and our children. There are several ways that our many skills can be a part of, again, changing the church from being this cloistered brick closed place with just a front door and a back door, and turning it into something that has, in the way it works, as though it has windows that you can see into and see out of, so that we are more in community than we've ever been. And community is more a part of us than it's ever been. I think that this is what we have to do. I think that that is what Spirit is moving us to. And I might say, and I get in trouble for saying this, I'm not sure whether our theological educations are really preparing us for that. Because in so many places, we don't have something that comes alongside. And it's happening creatively in certain places, thanks be to God, but we need more of it. What comes alongside your learning about Christian history and learning about the writings in the text and the original languages and learning about the sacraments, and what comes alongside that that's going to help you deal with somebody who's on crack cocaine? What's coming alongside that that'll help you deal with people who have mental and emotional health issues? When your church, what comes over the table, what comes in the offering is not enough to do the services, who's going to be your nonprofit law person? Who's going to be your grant writer? How are you going to be able to really give something back in terms of services? So all of those things are necessary, and they're all holy. And we need to pair these things together. It'd be great to have a theological degree and a nonprofit law degree to be paired together on purpose with intentionality, where we get enough of this and enough of this to really be able to go out there in the world and to do the work. There are possibilities, and I believe they can happen, but I think that we have to be broader in our thinking. Yes.
Apologies, and we ask for extra grace in advance if we mispronounce your names. The question, Bishop, is from Paul Ogeti Heath. How do you keep your faith even at a time when it seems not to be working?
How do you keep your faith even when it seems, I think that Paul may be saying that what it is that you had hoped would happen, the thing that you're trusting in, is not materializing. Is that close, Paul? I hope that that is close to the question that you are asking. How do you keep your faith when things around you are not what it is that you were believing for or hoping for? And I think maybe there's some of you that know about our work in HIV and AIDS. And I will share with Paul and with those of you that are with us in this conversation how my call to HIV and AIDS actually happened. My daughter's father, my former husband, Willie Charles Flunder, was a gay man. You know, I was a same-gender loving woman. He was a gay man. We got married in the Pentecostal church that we were both a part of. I think we thought that if we got married, we could sort of cancel out each other's gay. I just want you to know it didn't work out like that. So, needless to say, when he died from complications due to HIV, it was during the dying years of HIV, when people were dying two or three or four sometimes a week in the communities that I was connected to. And I had a huge depression about what it was about praying and asking God for an answer, praying and asking God for an answer, praying and asking God for an answer, and trying to keep my faith in place. And then having multiple loss syndromes, what it was diagnosed as, the depression that's associated, much like what happens during war times or huge disaster. And I remember that I had thrown myself a bit of a pity party. And during that time, Mother Shirley and I had already gotten together. But my depression was very much connected to the loss of burying primarily my brothers and sons. And it was tough. And so I got myself a significant amount of bourbon. And I put on some Donny Hathaway music. And specifically, it was the song that he wrote and sang. I think he wrote it, but I know he sang it. It was called Giving Up. You all may have heard it. It's hard to do when you really love someone. Giving up. And he was singing in the background. I was drinking the bourbon. I turned all the lights off and was crying like a baby. Just broken. My whole spirit was broken. Too much death. Too much painful, agonizing death. And while I was there doing it, the Spirit spoke to me and I know it was the Spirit, and gave me a bit of a blueprint about what our task was to be in that time. I could tell you a whole lot about everything and how it fell into place in terms of the opportunities and the grants and the education and the CDC and the housing, and I could go on and on and on and on about it. But it all came in that moment with this wrist-cutting music that I was playing, bourbon, the dark, and the presence of God. When my faith didn't seem to be moving it, God made me understand that what my faith had to become was works, because faith without works is dead. My faith had to become works, that if I really believed God, what I had to do was get in the fray. So I'm one of those people that were part of the original Act Up, where you lay down in the coffins and not let the cars go by in the front of the city hall. We call it Blacked Up because it was a bunch of Black folks mixed up with the Act Up folks. But we have Ryan White because of us. We have the Minority AIDS Initiative because of us. Why? Because we had to put our bodies in it. We have to put our bodies in it. We have to put our bodies in it. We have to embody our faith. And at the end of the day, good will win. Righteousness will run down like water, and justice like a mighty stream. I believe it with my whole heart, and my whole life is committed to it. I had to get in it now. I did finish my bourbon. I need to tell you that. I did turn Donny Hathaway off and turn the lights on, but I finished the bourbon. I just wanted to add that as a footnote. Next question.
Reverend Gowdy asks, how do we keep theology flexible, though not consumer-driven?
Wow. How do we keep theology flexible and not consumer-driven? I don't know that it's a bad thing to have things that are consumer-driven when they are righteous and right. Okay? But I think we have to keep it flexible from the standpoint that we are ready to change. And the thing about being consumer driven is once that reality gets attached to something, change is very hard. It is very hard. And when you build your life, like my mom did, you build your life on theologies. That's your whole life. And as she said to me one day, she told me to shut up talking. She asked me a question, then asked me to shut up. Shut up, Yvette, she said, because if what you're saying is true, I've spent 60 plus years of my life believing things that I didn't need to believe and doing things I didn't need to do. And I said to her, I said, that is why change is hard. Because we get stuck, intractable, and not flexible. Because we have given so much to it, it has to be right if I've been doing it 60 plus years. God would not have let me do this or believe this 60 plus years and it not be true. That can't happen. But it is hard for people to expect, accept, and apply change when they have given so much. But it goes back to what we have said earlier. It goes back to what happened when Harriet Tubman came through to get the slaves on the day that was the railroad day, whatever day that was. They never pre-announced it. When she came to your house, to your hut, to your cabin, she knocked on the door, she said, get your stuff, come now. And there were always people that said, oh, I can't do that. My husband is in the field. I can't, no, if you're gonna go, you have to come now. Pack a bag and come now. We'll get the rest of your people when we come back through. But we have to leave now. Travel light. I think that has so much to do with why it is hard to make those shifts. Because once we get deep into it, it is very hard to change because we have reputations. And I want you to know, I have preached the person that I am right now, the person that I used to be would have sent the person that I am to hell in a handbasket. And I had all the cliches and scriptures and everything that was necessary to send myself to hell. And the person that I am, it's like I am a theological transgender. I'm certainly a theological trans preacher, trans believer. Take that with you. Because the person that I am now is nothing like the person that I once was, or the person that I once was ever dreamed that that person would be. But yet I appreciate the person that I emerged from, because that person is the foundation of my belief in God. And in spite of everything I know and everything that I've learned, and the measure of my disappointment with theological institutions and churches and religion sometimes, I tell you what, beloved, the thing that I am the most glad about is that I still believe God. I think that's a miracle. You can't fake the funk on that. If you believe God and you can still believe God, then that gives me the real personal strength that I need. Sometimes I don't know what God is doing. I'm not clear on what God is saying. I'm not sure about how God is manifesting. I have known and seen and experienced God in many faiths by many different names and many kinds of manifestations. And I believe God. I believe. Thank God that in spite of everything, I believe. And I believe when I'm by myself, singing to myself in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, praying without any public around me, speaking love to the God of my understanding and receiving love from the God of mine. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God. That is the anchor. That's the thing that makes me feel like I've been strapped when I leave the house and I'm on my way somewhere and have to handle my business. It is God and the presence of God and the love of God that is in my back that helps my 5'2" self stand up to do the work that I am called to do. Yes and amen.
Bishop, the next question is from Michael Cronin.
Mm-hmm.
Please tell us about the core ethos statement of harmonizing with the teachings of Jesus and theological diversity within our communities,
Mm-hmm.
and how to hold the tensions and our internal struggles so we can do the work of the world.
So that's a book right there. But let me give you the quick and dirty, quick and clean that I feel about that. Jesus never wrote anything. So we're not sure altogether what all of the teachings of Jesus was or everything that Jesus did. Jesus was written about. Remember that. And what I believe people wrote about Jesus were the things that they most wanted us to hear and see. I think that Jesus' humanity was stolen from him by the writers. You don't know too many people that appear as babies and they come back again at 13, and then the next time you see them, they're 30 something, right? That's people don't live lives like that. We talk about, the council at Nicaea and other places, and decisions that were made that about Jesus being fully man and fully God. But simultaneously, we have all sorts of conflictual messaging, that when Jesus prayed, who did Jesus pray to? And when Jesus was in pain and angry and cried out, why have you forsaken me? Who is that Jesus is talking to? And then conversations about his humanity don't allow him eros at all. How can you be fully human and not have intimacy or not experience the erotic in any way? But, because there was such a tendency to dismiss that part of human reality in terms of on the list of things that are good and divine. He just didn't. They didn't give him any of that. So it begs the question, what are the teachings of Jesus? What is it that we can get from what the writers say that he said that are things that do not in some way compromise what it is that we have come to believe? That's why I think it's important to be connected to the divine. Because the writer of the Hebrews, the letter killeth, but the spirit makes alive. I think it's important to be connected in your own personal meditations to your understanding of the divine, and then to try to reconcile the written text in terms of what it says about the life of Jesus, or the historical accounts, which are few, of the life of this likely brown Palestinian Jew, to reconcile them with what we know of humanity. Certain things had to happen. If he ate, he had to pee and poop. That kind of goes along with it, okay? He was given to, it seems, to being very concerned about his own kind as a priority, which is kind of how all the rest of us are. There are several things that we can draw from what it is that we read that are messages around the edges. But grown folks have been alive long enough to know how humankind functions in the world. Let's give him his humanity back. If we're going to share Jesus, let's share the human who was agonized by his call and responsibility, who was in pain when they stuck him in the side with a spear, who died a horrible death, who knew to some degree that he was being hunted and that he was going to be crucified. That's our understanding of him, who cared, who was concerned, who lifted the disenfranchised. Let's talk about what they did say about him, but also anticipate there are several things that they did not. I think that we talk about Jesus saves. I said we need a campaign called Save Jesus. To save Jesus from religion in some way. I think is to understand the ways in which God elevates humanity. That in ways in which the church can times and religion can reduce and diminish humanity, God elevates, God with us, God in us, elevates humanity. And I like to reflect that there are two places in the text where God says, "This is my beloved, and in whom I am well pleased." One was at John's baptism, Jesus in his underwear, likely in the water, about to be baptized. And the dove lights on him. And God says, "This is my beloved." The other was at the Mount of Transfiguration, where the text talks about how glory surrounded him, such that the disciples fell back because they saw a visual manifestation of the glory of God surrounding Jesus. And they wanted to build tabernacles and tents. They wanted to build something, a memorial, a thing there to memorialize that moment. It was so powerful. But God said the same thing. "This is my beloved, in whom I'm well pleased." God said it when he was in his underwear at the beginning of his ministry in John's baptism. God said it again when glory surrounded him. So it is with us. God does not vilify and demonize our humanity. God is with us in our humanity. God is with us in our divinity. In fact, God lifts us in our humanity and our divinity and calls us friend. How about that? Glory to God. That's a Pentecostal moment I just had right there. Glory to God. Hallelujah. We are lifted and looked upon. God allows us to see in God's eyes and God into ours, the heart of God, and our hearts beat in sync with one another. What a wonderful blessing that is. That is where I think we can connect to other people, when we can kind of get out of the way of this hierarchical thing that first did this to Jesus, that diminished his humanity. And then we lift our humanity and lift his humanity as also holy. And God is well pleased with it. God bless.
Bishop, this pandemic has exposed the cracks in many of our congregations. We have smaller churches who or have older members who are technological challenged, even just trying to say that is a challenge, as well as larger congregations who are now one person is speaking to an empty auditorium.
Mhm.
And so in terms of finance, many of our churches are facing financial issues. Some are doing well, but others are truly struggling and having to reevaluate how they do ministry and how they do this outreach because the finances that they once depended upon simply are not there.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what advice you might have for congregations that are, feeling the pinch
Mhm.
in these days of COVID.
Well, I want to say again, we're not going to come out of it the way we went in. And in so many ways, again, thanks be to God. But one of the things we talked about is the possibility of a model of, of how we support our theological leadership in terms of what that fiscal impact is on the congregation. The other thing is I think it gives us an opportunity to look again at what we do with the sites and locations that we have as churches. And, churches were designed to be cloistered in many ways, the older buildings in particular, especially the ones with the wood pews and the little doors on the end and like that, it was designed to be cloistered. What happens if we take all the pews up and we create something that is truly some service to community on the times that we are not worshiping in it on Sundays when we go back? And we begin to see our opportunities to become nonprofit service organizations in some very real way. There are several things we can do with our buildings, whether we are renting or buying them, that can be of help and support to our community. And what that will do is put us in a position for philanthropy. And I suggest, because there are a number of people who are wanting to contribute to helping services that are a part of what it is that we can address as churches. If anybody ought to be addressing it, we ought to be addressing it. And there are unique needs right now. There are unique needs for parents, single parent families that have children who are trying to homeschool. And there's some unique needs, a social distancing pod for students who can be homeschooled, maybe 5 or 6 of them at a time at the church, so that their parents can work, so that the children can eat, and perhaps a bag lunch can be given to them, something like that. What else can we do with these buildings if we redesign them in a way that address the needs of people? And then there's philanthropy that is out there. One of the things I think we should do together as a group of leaders is start talking about how to touch and successfully glean from philanthropy, because a number of people want to help. They need to put their tax dollars at work and they want to help, but they need to know that we want to be helped. We should not suggest that and our denominations don't have enough money for all of that. We know that. But if we reduce our operating costs and we start to think of multi-use for the space where we are, we will not become less church. We will become more church. I realized that when we were building out space in this building where we are now. This is a big building. It was once the labor union's building in Alameda County here in Oakland. And it's a big building, and we demoed out some space and created a church, but I call it a vanilla church. It's got wood on the floor, it's got a light color on the walls, and it's got a contrasting color and good sound and all of that, right? But there's nothing in it. Even the platform is portable. Everything can be taken down. And it could just as easy become a flea market or a place where entrepreneurial artists sell their things, or a place where we can have a dance or a wedding, or when we have our baptism, our baptism pool is portable. It comes in parts, and we bring it in, we fill it up with water. We baptize by immersion. We drain it, we put it back. Because the idea is we won't have the building telling us who we are. We tell the building who we are. And it gives us opportunities to serve our community in rich ways. I think that there's something about that is more akin to what happened with church in its inception. You know, they, according to the way it reads in Acts, that they met regularly, they broke bread, they exchanged concerns, and no one was without. Everyone was fed, everyone was cared for. They met for those reasons, to check in and to see how might they be cared for. It had a social justice bent to it. And when it became overwhelming because of the widows and the orphans, because of the ways women were treated when their husbands died, and the debt went to them, and they either had to go into slavery themselves or put their children in slavery to pay off their husbands' debts, the diaconate was created to care for the widows and orphans, to do social justice work for the church or with the church. Hallelujah. It is what we are called to do. And we can shift, we can change, and we can find ways. We have the skills among us to find ways to do church unusual, buildings unusual, worship unusual. We can do all, and somebody said, well, the way we did it is the way I serve, and I'm gonna miss it. Yeah. But as the song says, my friend, the times, they are a-changing. And we are going to have to be swift enough to not be drug along by the changing of the times, but to hear the voice of God. And when the pillar and the cloud appears, when the Holy Ghost, which is our Harriet Tubman, says, okay, it's time, let's go. We have to be lean enough to be able to move into our what's next.
I want to sit and chew with that one. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. I don't see any other questions that we have, and I think that very well may be a great way to conclude this webinar, because that was some deep wisdom, both for the church leader as well as the layperson as well, just to truly meditate. And so, Bishop, I'd like to just, again, turn it back over to you for any last comments that you have. And if you wouldn't mind blessing us as our bishop with the word of closing prayer.
I'll be happy to. God bless all of you. I know a number of your names. Carla Halyard's a member of our church, and there's some others, some refugees as we call ourselves, and some others who are on the list who I know and have known for years, and some that I'm meeting for the first time. You're meeting me for the first time, perhaps in a forum like this, but just know we are connected in all the places that really matter. And we are what we are by cross-pollination. We are what we are. We are what we are because we have allowed and are allowing ourselves to open ourselves wide to the possibilities. God has a plan for this time. God has a plan. I'll be preaching tomorrow, City of Refuge, and my sermon title is that this death will not kill us. God has a plan for this time. We just have to know that and move forward. So if you're able and you're close enough to your screen, I'm going to ask you to point your hand in my direction, and I'm going to point my hand in your direction so that we can virtually lay hands on one another and believe God by the laying on of hands for what it is that we are petitioning God for. And now, gracious God, by all of your many names and all of your beautiful and magnificent and holy manifestations, we thank you so much for the privilege of intimacy with you. The fact that we can pray and we can ask, the fact that we can lament, that we can mourn, the fact that we can say our truth state our position and our opinion in your presence. It doesn't drive you from us. It doesn't push you away from us, because you already know us. In fact, you knew us before we were formed in our mother's wombs. And so today I pray for these leaders, every single one. I pray for a manifestation of your intent and your will and purpose in their lives, personally, in their families, if they are connected to family, in their lives, oh God, their bodies, their ministries, their call, the deep questions that they have, the deep disappointments that they have. I pray for the ministries that are struggling in this time. We're struggling with change. We're struggling, some of us, with lack. We're struggling with some confusion about what is next, while you have us, oh God, in many places still sheltering in place to some degree. God, I pray that you will speak to us, begin to burst forth in our imagination what your intention is. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Because the blessings of the Lord are rich, and they add no sorrow. We believe it now. We are confident that you are at the helm. We are not rudderless in this complicated time. Now we cast our cares upon you, and we give ourselves to you now. We listen carefully for your will, for your purpose, but we give ourselves once again to you, that we might be instrumental in this time to help our communities to get through and to what is your intention for us, both in our cities, in our states, in our country, and in our world. Now we believe you for it. We trust you for it. We pray for healing, for wholeness, for finances, for opportunity, for vision, for purpose. And we call these things into existence in the name of Jesus, and in the name and names of all that is holy, and all that is right, and all that is just, and all that is divine. And we declare that it is so. Amen. Ashe. And so it is. God bless you, my beloved.
Amen, amen. I'm in the in shadow here. I can truly say that Anderson Cooper and Rachel Maddow don't got nothing on you. You can take these questions, and very challenging questions. And I sure appreciate your time and your care and your love for each and every one of us. I want to say thank you to all of our participants today for making time on a Saturday to be educated in this way. Thank you again for our my two wing people, Deacon Roland and Deacon Hattie, who will soon be Pastor Roland and Pastor Hattie on tomorrow. Again, thank you so very much again for the love you have for yourselves, for your community, and for your God, the God of your understanding. Be blessed, everyone. Take good care.
Love you much. Take good care.
Thank you, Bishop.